Humans want real answers to real questions because they often have real problems. OpenAI launched ChatGPT. Within a week after that, the deep relationship between Microsoft and ChatGPT was revealed. Microsoft was blazing a path that Google had sort of pioneered. Google just started pushing every AI everything, almost as if they were panicking. That was disastrous.
If I have optimized for Google SEO for all those years, what's happening to my company then?
If you've optimized for Google, there's a good chance. And ChatGPT 5 comes out this summer, remembering they've just bought everybody's data to train on. It's crazy and it's not crazy. That's a responsibility of the big tech houses. Chaos is terrifying, especially if you're a small business. But if you're an internet service provider, we're going to be expected to do a lot more. Enjoy every second of it. Enjoy it as much as you can because it goes so.
Jim, what does Webcology even means?
Oh my goodness, we chose the name Webcology years ago to give us a great deal of latitude. Webcology is the ecology of the web, the place where people who work and search work. 18 years ago, when the podcast started, Google was just becoming the most dominant search resource on the web. The web as we knew it was changing rapidly. Again, it's in Google's ascension. Social media was just, Web 2.0 and social media was just becoming part of the web ecosystem. So when thinking of a name for our podcast, we didn't want to be limited only to SEO because, again, there were so many other digital marketing channels that were opening up. So we chose to talk about how the web itself worked and elements of the web worked with each other. Webcology seemed the best name.
That is pretty cool. And so you decided to start a podcast out of it. Tell me, what's the story of Webcology podcast?
The search engine optimization community, at least I'm one of the original search engine optimization experts, started in 1999 and have been involved since. The earliest part of the industry was very collegial. We were really working on new things and in a new environment. I mean, like we were in chat groups and the commercial web was like less than 10 years old. So we were all discovering and inventing and working together to do new things. It was like being in college again. It was a great atmosphere. People cooperated a lot. We shared a great deal of information. And one of the ways my career really took off was I started writing about search engines. I got published in Search Engine Watch and Search Engine Journal and the trade journals at the time. And I was lucky at the time. It was the dawn of the industry, so there wasn't a heck of a lot of competition back then. So I became one of the chief writers in the industry, and went to a conference in San Jose, a Search Engine Strategies conference. Met Darren Babin and Brandy Shapiro-Babin, the founders of Webmaster Radio, and 10 minutes later, I had a webcast, or I had a show on their network. It was called The Alternatives. We looked at any search engine that wasn't Google. And that show lasted 18 months, and then we started Webcology. Oh, that was back in a multi-search universe, which we may incidentally be entering again if Google stays on the path that they're on. There was Alta Vista, Dogpile, Magellan, Inktomi. There was Yahoo was still a viable working search engine. Microsoft had. This is even before Microsoft Live, and I'm sorry, I honestly don't remember the name of their original search engine. It sucked, for what it's worth. I bet you we can. The first name, yeah. That was it, sure, MSN. That was a viable search engine, although it was being fed by Yahoo. There was a whole network of relationships between various search engines that all fed each other information in the early days, and knowing how to balance what you were feeding each one guaranteed you success in all of them in one way or another. Well, that was just a much more fun environment to work in when there was a number of things to describe rather than this one big monolithic Googleverse to describe. Okay, so like 18, 20 months ago, OpenAI launched ChatGPT, just released it to the world, and then within a week after that, the deep relationship between Microsoft and ChatGPT was revealed. Sam Altman had his troubles with his board of directors, and Microsoft's interest got even deeper with ChatGPT, and then suddenly it was part of their search engine. And now Microsoft was blazing a path that Google had sort of pioneered and was supposed to be the pioneer on this because this is Google's universe, right? So Google's been working on machine learning and AI since, since 2010, but they've been doing it publicly since 2016 and publishing patents and sharing their information with the world to a limited degree. The rest of the world caught up with them really quickly and then forced their hand with the introduction of ChatGPT. So then Google just started pushing everything, almost as if they were panicking. And they introduced Gemini at the beginning of May, as everyone who was watching remembers, and that was disastrous. More than telling people to put paste on pizzas and eat rocks, Gemini was giving out really, really bad information, sometimes in areas that would be referred to as your money or your life, financial information or health information. And Google's giving out highly questionable medical advice, drinking urine to clear your kidney stones, for instance, other people's especially. That may or may not have I honestly don't know, but you see, I'm not a doctor, and neither's Google Gemini, apparently. So Google tried to brazen through, and if they keep giving really bad advice, they're going to lose search share. That's going to happen. You can't avoid that. Humans want real answers to real questions because they often have real problems. And there's a responsibility that Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, all the search engines, and people who work with them have, remembering that people need real information because they might actually have real problems. And so Google moved faster than they should, and perhaps irresponsibly. And now they're pulling back. Late last week, it was that Friday 5 p.m. announcement, Google announced that they have to pull back because AI... Well, this is why they do late Friday afternoon announcements, because then the weekend happens. And no, Google's going to retool the generative AI answers, AI overview. It's going to come up on far fewer searches until they feel they're getting it right and not telling people to eat rocks. And yeah, we'll see what happens if they continue giving bad information to people. Then Google will go the way of Yahoo, which incidentally is mounting a comeback.
And that's big. So just for the record, because we are recording this, it is the 3rd of June 2024. I know I like to make my episodes evergreen and intemporal, but since we are quoting dates and things that recently happened, just to make sure that people listening to this have the accurate information. So many things to unpack here. First of all, what's the incidence of all this for people who have optimized for years for Google and not any other platform? Because I guess if I want my company to pop up in the results of ChatGPT when they get a query, I want it to be accurate and I want to be quoted, right? But if I have optimized for Google SEO for all those years, what's happening to my company then?
Well, if you've optimized for Google, there's a good chance that ChatGPT has read your material, has seen what you've written, what's on your website, and absorbed it with the great bulk of all the world's information, as ChatGPT is, and all LLMs are trying to access as much as possible. So just because you optimize for Google doesn't mean that every AI in the world hasn't come by to check out your stuff and train on your stuff, because let's face it, we put it in a public space for people to read. People, including bots, because this is the internet, bots are people too. They come and see your stuff. So chances are, if you've optimized for Google, you've been included in the LLMs. The question is, and going to be into the future, how do you write material so that more often than not, your ideas and, more importantly, product details are the right phrases or words to finish the sentence? So LLM models kind of work that way. Unless there's deep filters on them, they're really just statistically completing sentences or completing, phrases, because this is how it's supposed to be. So the question is, how do you write so that your product and ideas get wormed in there? And that's where SEO in the AI world will be going in the future. But that, honest to goodness, is going to be dependent on the AI, how to say this, the AI reproduction engines. I don't really want to call them search engines. They're much more reproduction engines. How well they're able to attribute where they... I can't say where they got information from, but if they're able to attribute statistically where this phrase or sentence might be found on pages that they've been through. And I'm not even sure that's possible, so that gets very confusing. Search and AI don't really play well together, but it's being forced into search anyway.
So the reason I'm asking this is, what happens to all my links that I acquired throughout all those years? Because whilst I understand how ChatGPT or any other AI tool can scrape pages and millions, billions, trillions of pages to get content out of there, how is it able to make the difference between something that is accurate to begin with, but also has been validated by the broader space? Because Google has this link scraping engine as well, whilst AI maybe not. Actually, I don't know. Question for you, Jim.
Links have been used as the great verifier since Google became the dominant search engine. For any of your listeners who might know, I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. Google was invented by two academics, Larry and Sergey. They attended Stanford University, and they wanted a citation engine. They wanted to be able to look up references without having to go to the file cabinets in the library, or to the index cards. So they wanted a machine that would tell them how often any given article was cited and by whom. That became the basis of how to verify something is right or wrong. And it worked really well. That became the kernel for PageRank, which was how Google ranked websites. Basically, the more links from relevant sources you have, the more votes of confidence in your content. That was the earliest kernel of Google. They've adapted and built on that ever since. And every time they've tried to move away from links as the verifier, the quality of information they offer has declined. So citations, 25 years later, citations are still the strongest way to verify that somebody knows what they're talking about. Even with all the manipulation, even with all the link manipulation, it's still the best way. I think links have to still matter. Okay, so imagine a search result environment. So when a search is conducted, a whole bunch of stuff happens in the background. To go back to the ecology example, when you look at a forest, you see trees and you see water and you see squirrels and birds and moose and deer and all sorts of stuff that you can eat or you can drink or you can just, enjoy. That's the surface. That's the stuff you go to the forest looking for. But to make that happen, there's a whole network of things happening underground, a mycological network of fungus, connecting all the trees. That makes the forest grow. That's what's happening underground at Google. So when you do a search, and with AI, you're going to see a bulk of AI results with a summary of everything that AI can think that it's read about any given subject. And then you might see like references to web pages or websites that the search engine thinks match the topic. That's 50-50 accurate today. And then under that, you might see 10 blue links. So the links, inbound links coming into your website are used to verify the accuracy and placement of the 10 blue links. If that gets pushed down under the fold by AI results, that's kind of like being on page 2, which is kind of like being invisible. So we'll see what users want to do. If users want to look at the summarized results and get their answer that way, and in many cases that actually may be more useful to them than having to troll through 10 pages to find out which one gave them the who's got the most points in a football league. You don't need to troll through 10 links to find that, and generative AI could easily give you that answer. It's right there on the screen. That's what you wanted. So in that case, an informational search, sometimes that works really well. But if you're looking for financial advice, you want options. You don't want what the AI thinks is right for you.
Okay, so I love this nuance. When I want data, I want something as precise as possible, as like snapshot as possible. Hey, give me the top 10 goalers, however you say in English. I'm not a football fan, as you can see, of the league. Then ChatGPT makes sense. I want to say like, hey, I want to think about 3 ways I could manage my, savings and financials. And then you need to look into a bit more of like details, and then be going into the granular details of the search. And that's where the traditional model of Google makes more sense.
Well, moreover, you want control over your choices, and that comes with actual research. ChatGPT may be able to give you the basic definitions, but beyond that, honest to goodness, trust a human. They understand your nuances.
So I have another one for you, Jim, and I'm actually going to run the search on ChatGPT at the same time. So what if I want to buy something? What if I say, okay, it's a snapshot into my personal life right now. I want to buy a nice ring, like something I can wear, like something that will do nice. If I Google that, I will have a few propositions with pictures right away. I'll have a few options from e-commerce shops that, again, I can choose from, right? I will have the paid ad and then the organic ad, the organic search. How should and can ChatGPT propose me good results for that if I want to buy a physical product, for instance?
Okay, so you're looking for a ring. ChatGPT can tell you everything you want to know about wedding rings, historically, romantically. I mean, honestly, it depends on the keywords you use in your search query. I want to buy a ring, or just wedding ring near me, wedding ring at particular jewelry. You know what I mean? There's a dozen different ways you can write that search query. So depending on how you write it, so different search engines work different ways, by the way. ChatGPT will probably just try to give you an answer about wedding rings based on what you've written and just replying to your query. Google Gemini, on the other hand, as it was programmed to work, I don't know how they're going to do it moving into the future, but as it was programmed to work, Google Gemini would do a secondary search behind your search, trying to figure out, based on all the information it had about you from all the Google devices you use, trying to figure out what your actual search intent was, so they could supposedly deliver you the most valuable sets of documents. When it comes right down to it, you're probably looking at paid results. You'll get a summary of the topic, and then you'll get, in Google at any rate, you'll get tiles, shopping tiles, a carousel of tiles, interspacing paragraphs in the ChatGPT narrative, or the Google Gemini narrative. How those tiles are generated, we're not entirely sure. At the end of the day, it may well be paid results. And Google's actually alluded to at their Google Marketing Live conference the week after they introduced Gemini that those would be paid results. In ChatGPT over at Microsoft Bing, those are algorithmically, their result sets, their search result page looks different. They have ChatGPT running down the side and also links running down the other side. So you have a explanation result and the 10 blue links you can choose from, giving you, I think, more options. And that's the kind of thing that I think could hurt Google, because consumers, maybe they want both. You can't force one on the other when they know that, you can't force one on them when they know that the other is available. So either you make me scroll for it, or I could just go over here and get both at the same time.
I love tech. So I think you're pretty accurate. You actually raise a super interesting point, which is how is paid ads going to be taken into account when if ChatGPT or any other AI out there becomes the number one search engine for people, because there will be a massive business model here and a massive economy. So here are the results. When I say, I want to buy a silver ring, I ChatGPT that. First thing it gives you is a kind of list of what you need to take into account and in consideration when buying a silver ring. Like when buying a silver ring, here are a few key considerations to keep in mind. So it stays very generative AI and like text generative AI, basically, like explaining you, hey, okay, you want this, here is how you should think about it, or here are some areas of explanation. But then I said, can you propose me some buying options? And then it starts linking to, name a few brands that I didn't know, by the way. James Avery, Blue Nile, Tiffany & Co., Etsy, Pandora, Overstock, and so on. You can actually click on links, but it takes you to the website. And I'm answering ChatGPT, hey, the links are not linking to the silver ring category of each website. Now it gives me a new link, which is meant to lead me to the silver rings category of each website, but you cannot click on the links. So I tell him that, and he's putting other links that I can still not click on. And I'm also wondering about the geography of it. Like maybe that's for the US, but what if I'm actually located in France, completely randomly? So it's not there yet, but between what you say and what you can see in ChatGPT for search, it's going to get there. It's pretty freaking good. It's crazy.
And ChatGPT 5 comes out this summer. We understand it's supposed to be light years ahead of GPT 3.5 and 4.0 and 4.0. They've had two 4.0s. One's the professional version, one's the public version. And ChatGPT 5 is supposed to be light years ahead of that. So we'll see what happens. Remembering they've just bought everybody's data to train on. They've been, with Reddit and Quora and many of the other smaller chat forums, they've bought their way into everyone's data. It is and it isn't. I mean, like, it comes down to how to say this. It's crazy and it's not crazy. We put this information in the public space. We did it for a reason. All of us, every one of us who published to the web over the last 25 years have put that stuff there for a reason. And that reason was we wanted someone to see it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have put it there. It's really dumb to put something out in public if you don't want people to see it. So this is the new way it's being seen. What we need is for that way to be accurate, and that's a responsibility of the big tech houses, and we should all be really angry at them. They're pushing envelopes that they shouldn't be pushing. But here's the thing: we've never been able to advance internet technology without doing it in the open, without the internet itself advancing that technology, affecting that technology, and more importantly, to speak to something you'd said earlier, the users have to tell us what they want. Is there going to be a big market for paid advertising? That really depends if the users trust paid advertising in the future. Maybe they will. If there is, PPC, pay-per-click, pay per impression, that's going to be massive.
We live in an exciting time, Jim.
Indeed. Chaos is terrifying, especially if you're a small business. But if you're an internet service provider, if you're providing if the gold rush was really disruptive for lots and lots of people, but it was an opportunity for people who sold shovels or people who sold transportation. That's what we do.
Indeed, during the gold rush, it's the shovel reseller that are making the sale, that are making a success.
That's by far the oldest example on the internet, by the way.
But so, Jim, I like to see you a bit as a visionary, because back in 1998, was it? 1996, you opened the cyber cafe in Victoria, BC. Tell me a bit more about this. First of all, it's pretty cool. When I was young, I wanted to open a cyber cafe because I was like, if I have a cyber cafe, I mean, my parents don't have any excuses to stop me from playing video games anymore. That was my dream. Well, took another road. But why the cyber cafe?
I went to school to become a counselor, and I was working with street youth, youth at risk. I was in my early 20s, had 5 roommates on a beautiful house down by a beach in Victoria, BC, which is at the southern tip of an island, right on the Pacific Ocean. And I'd gone to my 3rd funeral one summer. There was a bunch of bad heroin that was going around the streets of Victoria, and 3 of my kids had OD'd. I'd gone to my 3rd funeral, and so on the way home, I got this massive bottle of wine. I honestly didn't care which roommate was home. I was getting drunk with one of them. It happened that Gary, he worked for Nortel. He was a network technician for what was at the time Canada's largest tech company, and the company that actually made fiber optics that spanned around the world. But that's a story for 4 years down the road. He hated his job too. He was an early computer technician, a network technician, but couldn't stand what he was doing. So as we got very drunk on that beach, we decided we were going to open a cyber cafe because the internet was this new big thing that fascinated both of us. So 2 months later, we got the keys to a storefront in the basement on what was called Douglas Street, but was basically Main Street in Victoria, and opened a cyber cafe with 26 networked Pentium 2s that we had somehow leased from a supplier of Gary's at an insane cost. We were stealing the T1 feed from a internet service provider that hadn't opened yet. The T1 existed, but they weren't using it, so somehow Gary stole it. Got in a lot of trouble for that. Well, they eventually started charging us, which was a considerable expense that we didn't have to deal with before. That was one of the reasons the cafe wasn't viable anymore. Excuse me. Anyway, we opened this space. It was the fastest connection probably in Western Canada outside of universities or government. And so all the gamers descended on us. And this is when Quake was just taking off. The first-person shooter, the sequel to the antecessor to Doom. And Quake was a league. It was actually probably the first cyber sports league. And it wasn't even a league. It was just amateur organization, but you had people forming teams playing against each other, and the on-ramp became an arena. And we literally had people over a Christmas break, we had kids fly up from Florida, from California to play at the cafe against other kids. John Romero came up one time. One of the inventors or the owners of ID Software, id Software. So the on-ramp lasted 18 months, and we had a lot of ideas about the internet, but no idea how to run a business. Especially, the cafes are complicated. There's a lot of moving pieces. Recently, though, honest to goodness, I rediscovered beans from Salt Spring Island coffee roasters, the people we were buying our beans from before. I live in Toronto now. I'm about 4,000 miles from Victoria. but I'm drinking the same beans that we had, same coffee we served in the cafe, at least from the same roastery. I just discovered it at my local supermarket. I was so pleased. Canada's small, even though it's a massive place.
So we've taken quite a tangent, but this is what I love about this podcast. So with Webcology, what do you do exactly? And since you've hinted a bit about it, but what's the future of it? Because since you're covering all things search and web, we are quite at a, how to say this in English, like at a turn. Like some big things can happen. Some big things can fail as well. Google with the AI search right now, but hey, it's just a matter of time, I'm sure. So let's get out our crystal balls here, Jim. What's the future of Webcology and the web?
The future of the podcast Webcology is we're going to try to keep on doing the same thing that we've been doing for the last 17 or 18 years. Trying to make a really complicated environment as simple to understand and give actionable information to our audience as possible, and have fun doing it. Like, we want to be silly doing it. We don't want to. It's a serious podcast. We I hope we give good, solid, actionable information, but we try to be goofy while we do it, because people even other SEOs' eyes glaze over when you talk about search too much. Where's the web going? I honestly have no idea. We're going virtual. I honestly think we're going to be getting VR reality within 10 years. I was a big fan. Okay, so the web as we understand it today was really informed by Star Trek. Whenever you make something, you have to have a vision in mind, some reason you're doing it, something that made you think, yeah, that's a solution I need to solve, or that's the way I want to solve this solution. So think of all the stuff we have now that just feels Star Trek-y. Even AI, I think, is the what they're trying to do with AI is recreate the computer voice on Star Trek. You ask it anything, it gives you the answer. You go about your business. Done. Privacy has to die for that to happen. But, privacy actually died a hell of a long time ago. But we just haven't really acknowledged that yet. And by the way, I don't like that. Privacy is really important. Privacy is incredibly important for a functional democracy. But I'm not sure we have a functional political system, no matter what the political system. So what we do have is people trying to act at their own benefit and as much goodwill as possible, because that still does exist. Where's it going? Probably a William Gibson smashed with Steve Jobs' view of the world. Steve Jobs was really into closed gardens, things that he could absolutely control, information spheres that Apple could define and make work precisely with their own machines. Given the level of chaos, just technological, how to say this, there's so much that we're going to be able to do with technology, and it's the rate at which we're developing it is accelerating so quickly that you're going to have very specific technologies to use it, I think. Now, that may flatten and generalize, but I think we're going to see a lot of closed garden environments, and they're going to be more prevalent than they were in the past. The days of the web being a free range are probably limited. And it's going to be a lot more expensive to participate in this space, not because accessing it will be expensive, but because of the number of things you need to do to access it properly or to service it properly. Think of all the things you do with data from your podcast, any individual podcast. I mean, on Webcology, we just put a podcast stream out and go on to the next week. Your podcast, on the other hand, you're doing video, you're doing newsletters, you do the audio stream, and you probably chop the audio stream up into little bits and pieces that you can market out in different segments to different audiences. You guys are far more advanced than what we're doing on Webcology, and it probably shows in your audience numbers. And that's what you actually have to do to access the audience today. I'm surfing on being an old man. I'm surfing on having a great reputation and doing what I've been doing forever. But, I mean, let's face it, my way is, I got to adapt to the new ways instead of just keeping doing my thing, or I'm going to go the way of Yahoo.
Yeah, I mean, there is some benefits in the old ways. I'm seeing yeah, exactly. And I'm also seeing my lovely mother, which I won't name here. But she loves her old technology, which is getting very close to no technology at all. But you have a point where to enter in the city we are living in, where she lives in, now to enter the bus, you need to produce a digital thing or a QR code that you can only get with a smartphone. What happens to the people who don't have a smartphone? And I guess you can apply that to anything that's happening on the internet. And I'm sure, Jim, you're completely up to date with the web and the things. You literally knew of the Google's update at 5 p.m. on Friday, which I didn't. So you're definitely more informed than me. But what I mean is that you have people out there who are not going to embrace AI whatsoever, and that are going to get far outdistanced because they're going to be people who can 10x, 20x, 100x. It gets exponential, their productivity, whilst other people cannot embrace it properly or do not understand it properly or don't want to get bothered getting it properly. And that's going to create huge discrepancies between people, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. As service providers, we're going to be expected to do a lot more with the time that we have available to us and the tools that we have available to us, which allow us to do a lot more. Use them or don't use them. That's, and to anybody out there in Radio Land, use them or don't use them. It's your business. If you use them, your productivity will rise. If you don't use them, your productivity will probably tend to suffer. What do you want to do with your time? Now, the question is, how accurate is this going to be? And again, if you're providing a service to a paying public, you owe them accuracy. You owe them that responsibility. It's really important. We can't let that slip.
Jim, tell me a bit more about Digital Always Media. What is that, and what are you guys doing over there?
Well, what are we doing? Digital Always Media is my company. It's the company that I do business as. It was a larger company. It was actually a small agency at one time. Now it's just myself. It was myself and two other SEOs. We had a very large international accountancy as our main client and several smaller clients. 2.5 years into the contract with the international accountancy, they went a different direction. And when you have a whale client, doesn't matter how many small clients you have, if you don't have another whale to come up behind them, you have to scale down. And we had to scale down. I'm the last person standing, mostly because I love the name Digital Always Media. And it's providing me a financial infrastructure to continue the SEO business. Digital Always Media is a boutique SEO company that serves a very limited number of fairly large corporate clients. And I tend to serve them through a outside agency known as Brand Labs, which is a extremely cool development firm that based in Detroit, Michigan. I've had a 5-year relationship with them as Digital Always Media. Best gig I've ever had in my life. I'm loving working with these people. They're smart. They're really responsive. They have the fun thing about working with really large corporate clients is at least their IT teams tend to be staffed by professionals who know what they're doing, who have the time to do what they need to do, and who are getting paid to do what they need to do. It's you have to learn to speak a level of corporatese to get through a lot of the red tape to get changes implemented on these websites. Once you've established trust in the organization, you're working with if 9 times out of 10 is obviously not a very general rule, but 9 times out of 10, you're working with a well-oiled team, and it's smooth. It's an excellent experience. And I'm actually coming up on my 5th year working with Brand Labs as an outside consultant. And again, as I said, best gig I've ever had. I love working with these people, and brandlabs.us. And I love working with their clients. Yeah. So Digital Always Media right now is more a vehicle than a company.
Makes sense. But so what you focus on is SEO expertise. And then you're going to have some consulting gig with Brand Labs, and you're going to deal with corporate clients. And you're basically helping them with all things IT infrastructure in order to optimize for search. That's roughly painted. That's the idea.
My strongest expertise is in technical SEO. Which, when you're working with corporate websites, unending technical issues, indeed, and like all huge machines, they require regular maintenance, or they will break. And breaks tend to have cascading. When something breaks, that tends to be a cascading problem. So the role of the SEO in a large corporation is often catching problems before they become problems. But if you're on top of it, it's hard work, but it's how to say this. It's hard work, but I've had much harder.
What's the biggest challenge you've ever faced with your podcast?
I mean, okay, outside of personal challenges, I've had a podcast. I had a podcast partner named Dave Davies for 16 years. He had to move on. He was working as an independent SEO as well for his own agency. And now he's the head SEO of one of the largest AI firms in the world. His job required him to move on. Dave and I had 16 years working together. We had a incredible relationship where we just understood each other's patter. I knew exactly when he was going to say something, and 9 times out of 10, I knew what he was going to say. And Webcology is done live to podcast with as few edits as possible. It used to be Webmaster Radio used to be a destination web radio station. So originally, Webcology was live to podcast. When we did the show, we were broadcasting live over the web. You could go to webmasterradio.fm and tune in live. It doesn't work that way anymore, unfortunately. That was so much fun. That was like walking a tightrope without a safety net beneath you. And so every week it was terrifying. But again, if you're an entrepreneur, terrifying is often kind of fun. That's the point. You take risk and reward. Seriously, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So one of the biggest challenges was when Webmaster Radio went to a streaming format away from the destination radio format. That was a really hard adjustment, because we were aware we didn't have a live audience. And I think that really affected our relationship with the audience as we understood it. And in podcasting, your relationship with your audience is everything. You got to be able to feel it. And I mean, it's not that I don't feel it now. I really do feel close to the audience that I'm aware of. And I hope that there's more out there than those I'm aware of. But I really feel close to people who communicate with us and who've noted that Webcology is important to them. But it's a little different when I know I'm talking to a tape recorder rather than a live audience. So that was a big challenge. Dave and I had to do that about 6 years ago, had to overcome that. Then 2 years ago, Dave had to move on. And one of our regular co-hosts, we've been doing this for 16 years, and we've missed maybe 8 or 9 episodes in that time. So we had regular co-hosts who would come in if either Dave or I had to be on the road or were ill or for whatever reason. Christine Schackinger is an incredibly experienced SEO. And she was our regular guest host if Dave or I weren't able to attend a podcast. She came in to take Dave's place. I love working with Christine. She's one of the smartest SEOs out there. She has an incredible technical background and has forgotten more about the web than I'll ever know. And I know a lot about the web, and I swear to God, she's forgotten more about it than I'll ever know. But you have to learn a whole other pattern. You have to learn a whole other rhythm. She has to learn a whole different rhythm and all that stuff. And that's been a challenge. I think we're doing great. I mean, our audience numbers are apparently up. But that's something that's hard to overcome. And I guess the other hard thing that's hard to overcome is, again, I've gone from being one of the pioneering visionaries in the sector to somebody who's keeping up with the pioneering visionaries. And that's how it's supposed to work. That's how generations work. But, when you're experiencing it, it kind of sucks. But it's how it goes.
Massive kudos, and thank you so much for sharing that insight, because I think that's a thing a lot of people face, because everything goes so fast nowadays. I mean, it's not even like, can you be the best in the world or can you be the first, but how long are you going to stay the first? Because it just goes so fast. And like being conscious of it and then being able to like learn from it and still progresses, I think it is an amazing personality trait.
Enjoy every second of it. Enjoy it as much as you can, because it goes so fast.
And what makes you not give up? Because I know a lot of people who, faced with such situation, would just be like, I was screw it then, or I'm giving up.
Are you kidding? This is fascinating. I love going to work. I love tuning in every day. I've kind of constructed a reality where I can do pretty much anything I want, as long as I'm providing good service to my clients. If I want to go shopping at 2 p.m. or have a nap, I can do that. How do I keep up? I got to pay the bills. I got to save for retirement. I got to pay medical expenses. I live in Canada. I got an expensive life. But I'm doing something that is so fascinating. Every day, the first 2 hours of my day, I just read. Learn new things. I happen to have liked going to school. I like learning. So search is always changing. If you're into reading and into learning and into communicating, I still think it could be a really rewarding career. I honestly don't know what the future is. I don't know if I'd recommend getting into it. I don't know if I'd recommend people be a writer either, but being a writer has been quite good for me. So, but why do I not give up? Because the world is too fascinating to give up on.
Jim, we usually finish these interviews on a question that I ask to everybody. What are 3 podcasts that you listen to that you would recommend me and our audience? And disclaimer, you cannot say Webcology, but there will be a link towards it in the show notes nonetheless. So that being said, 3 podcasts that you listen to that you would recommend me.
SEO 101 with Ross Dunn and Scott Van Ack. It was a sibling show on the Webmaster Radio Network, and I think they take a lot of responsibility with the information they give out. They're really friendly, and they go much more in depth into specific issues than Webcology does. We're kind of a general overview, and we try to give a newsy view of the topic. They go right into it. So you want a great drill down? SEO 101. I really like the Ezra Klein podcast, and I'm gonna get 2 for 1 here, because they're both covered by the New York Times banner, and Freakonomics. I've been listening to Freakonomics since the 2000s. Love Steve Levitt. Again, Ezra Klein, just a smart, and highly intelligent and insightful writer. Don't always agree with what the guests say, but I love the insight they give. And right now, I would urge people to listen to the Ukraine podcast offered by the Telegram, in the UK. I think it's really important that people keep up with what's happening in the war in Ukraine, and that Ukraine come out of this war victorious. I think it's important for Europe and for the Western world. So that's a podcast I listen to daily, and I will until Russia is expelled from Ukraine's borders.
So that's 2, because there was 2 for 1. So what's the 3rd? Now is the time, G, where you put out your Spotify or Apple podcast and you check the last podcast that you listened to. Go for it. I love it. That makes it more lively and more authentic.
What is coming up? Okay, what is Spotify recommending for me today? And by the way, Daniel Elk, it takes a lot to make this content. You can get Webcology on Spotify, but you can get a lot of podcasts on Spotify. Okay, here's a good one. Here's a great one. It's a bit older, but he is still creating historic podcasts. The History of Rome with Mike Duncan, by Mike Duncan, Texan historian. Mike Duncan. I urge, if you want a really chill, humorous, and incredibly in-depth look at Roman history and several other histories as well. His series on revolutions is brilliant. But Mike Duncan is a podcaster's podcaster. This guy's voice, his meter, and the way he structures the information he gives to the audience, you can learn so much about how to structure your own show and know how to be warm with the people who are listening to you.
Love it. It seems to be a podcast series. I mean, there are plenty of episodes, but 192 actually.
Yeah, Duncan started this just because he wanted to talk about Rome, but people loved him, and it launched his career as a major historian. And so, if people are in the podcast world, and you want to, he's an example of how you can use your expertise in the podcast world to further your real world career, because his job is historian. He shares his information in podcast form. His job is not podcaster. His job is historian. But his podcast has made him one of the most noted ones. And that's, if you're really, really, really serious about your audience, your information, and following up, having other products that you offer, this is the value of putting all the effort into doing a podcast.
That's so funny. I love how those interviews sometimes just shift my mind completely. I've always seen also in the range of, hey, you want to boost your career, do a podcast, but not in the way you just described it. In the way of, hey, just launch a podcast and interviewing experts in the field. You will learn so much. You will network. You will connect with people that you would have otherwise never dreamt of accessing to, eventually, or after many, many years. And that will skyrocket your gut. That's what happened with our first podcast with Usam. Like, the beginning, it was just the two of us, and then it ended up us interviewing the biggest minds of the industry, and it worked like a charm. Like, the way you're describing it here is just like, hey, you have a deep expertise, start a podcast by yourself, and tell this expertise. Because then you also have something to show for. And you also apply to jobs, go to rewards or awards or whatever it is, and say, here, guys, I have actually a 192 episode series about Rome. Want to test me about history?
Well, and chances are the person he's applying to a job, again, in his field, is probably aware of the podcast. It is really of a high quality. It's a great show. But yeah, the other tip I would give is, if you're doing a podcast, get a podcast partner. My goodness, it's so hard to do it on your own. And honestly, it's so hard to do it on your own.
Jim, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus. It was a true masterpiece about SEO and where this is going. And it was also a very cool conversation. Thank you so much.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.